support your system.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back live. After Dr. Blaylock leaves us in an hour, I will get back into the New York Times, Time Magazine, the Mail, and other publications, including Wired, promoting huge classes of viruses that are live that go in and literally destroy receptor sites in the brain for, quote, fear and stress hormones. Now I'm reading directly from the National Institutes of Health, Stanford Research, the Pentagon. They are saying they're going to deploy this in the troops. And I was talking to Dr. Blaylock, and he said, well, I've got to research that more. I've seen some of that. But he said Dean Koontz wrote a book about that, best-selling author, called Fear Nothing, about it. So I'll ask him about that. It seems like, you know, what we see in popular culture and fiction is becoming reality. But I've seen this information for 10 years. Dr. Russell Blaylock is a board-certified neurosurgeon, that's brain surgeon, author, and lecturer, and he's worked with and helped develop some of the most popularly used procedures in brain surgery. His bio just goes on and on. We'll give you his websites so you can do more research on it. But he's covered how aspartame, MSG, bisphenol A, and all these things that are in the food and packaging the food are wreaking havoc. And he was, of course, with us last year pointing out that this was a dangerous H1N1 vaccine for the flu, that it had serious adverse health effects. Now, the British Medical Journal has admitted that. I had the editor on a few months ago, that it was all a fraud, payoffs to the government officials to make tens of billions of dollars. We had Wolfgang Wodarg, the medical doctor, on, who headed up the EU Commission that found it was a dangerous fraud. And, of course, now I have the London Telegraph yesterday admitting a tenfold increase in under 5-year-olds having serious convulsions from an autoimmune brain inflammation with the H1N1, and they're suspending the shots this year of flu shots for under 5s. So, again, Dr. Blaylock got attacked in the media last year for talking about this, completely vindicated in spades. And so we'll talk about all of this with him. But the main reason he agreed to come on, a very busy person, we appreciate his time, is we now have New York Times, Wired Magazine, all these mainstream publications. We have these articles up at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com promoting putting lithium in the water, whether we like it or not, so we, quote, don't commit suicide, because their studies show that Texas towns that have it naturally occurring have lower crime rates. So they're now just going right to full social control. This is not a science fiction movie. This is going on. Top British bioethicist at Oxford, top U.S. bioethicist. And the New York Times and others are saying, as well as the American Psychiatric Association and British Psychiatric Association, that this is a good idea. They also want to add statins and Prozac to the water. So now they want to treat everybody for cholesterol when they admit the statins attack the liver. So I guess just hundreds of drugs in the water. I mean, this is THX 1138, Brave New World. Dr. Blaylock, thank you for joining us, Doctor.
Well, thank you, Alan.
I tell you, they're really coming out of the closet with all of this. I mean, you were reading it decades ago in medical research journals and talked about it, and now they're just coming out with it.
Well, yeah, this has been a dream of these people for a long time, is to remake humanity. You know, if you look back in some of the early writings, and as I quoted, I think, on one of your programs about Dr. Lilly's book on the history of molecular biology, and she talks about how in the early days the Rockefellers were obsessed with remaking humanity, changing their biological structure. In the beginning by eugenics, but later they realized that DNA manipulation is a better method, and that he funded a tremendous growth of the biological programs throughout the United States and some of our major institutions with that goal in mind. And now we're seeing this come to fruition, where they're seriously and openly talking about, well, we need to make it where we can remove fear from soldiers so that they'll be able to fight better in war, which means they're going to be more likely to die if they don't have this protective fear impulse. Remove stress, so all of us sort of apathetic and willing to accept whatever we're told. Yeah, I mean, they're really into some serious things here, and their biology is teaching them how to do it. And we're finding you can manipulate the brain and remake a person's whole neurological makeup. Well, some years ago, there was a book written about biological control of the mind, which they said that the last refuge of your individuality is your own mind. Well, now they want to attack that last refuge. It's an assault on it, so that you cannot think what you want to think. You cannot have your own mind, your own private thoughts. They're going to control them. And this is serious business. They're seriously talking about this, and they're so excited about it, they don't really care that anyone knows. And I found it interesting, in this article that was in Huffington about the lithium in the water, the way they treat their opponents, that anyone who disagrees with this is a knee-jerk, irrational person.
That's right. We've got a George Soros-funded publication in the New York Times that they quote says the same thing, that you're a kook if you don't want the government, and see, they psychologically put it back on us, which is just asinine. I mean, imagine if your neighbor showed up at your house and said, I want to put lithium in your water to make you servile. You'd say, get out of here, crazy man. But the government and the media is pushing it, and then they preemptively say, first we were kooks for saying this was their plan because we were reading their own textbooks and documents. Now, as they roll it out publicly, they preemptively say, you're crazy if you don't let us drug the water with a toxic antipsychotic.
Exactly. That's exactly the stage they went through. At first, they deny it, say you're crazy for even saying they wanted to think about it. Now that they're admitting they were planning this all along, you're crazy to resist it. Now, it's interesting, the whole justification of the lithium in the water is that it reduces suicides and violent behavior. But their previous program, fluoridation, shown by several large studies, one was the Dartmouth University study in which they looked at 280,000 children, found that it increased, when you fluoridated the water in a community, it increased the lead content of the water. That increased suicides and violent behavior and criminal behavior. A Canadian study looked at the same thing and found when you fluoridated the water, it doubled the lead content of the water. When they compared communities that had fluoridated versus unfluoridated water, they found higher suicide rates and violent crime rates in the fluoridated communities versus non-fluoridated when they were matched for all other criteria. Well, it was also known that when lead is even increased slightly to the contents that this fluoridation was causing, produced hyperactivity, it increased substance abuse, it increased suicide, and it increased violent behavior and crime significantly. Well, these are the very things now they're giving us the justification, putting another metal in the water, lithium. Well, if you want to reduce substance abuse, suicides, violent behavior, and crime, just take the fluoride out of the water. And take the lead out of the water. That's the easiest way to do that, and that's what the Safe Water Act says. The purpose of the EPA is to remove contaminants for the water. Now they reverse that. They're going to add contaminants to the water. And if you look up lithium, lithium is considered a toxic metal. Now, in the concentrations they're proposing using, yes, it does have some beneficial effects on brain protection, brain growth, reversal of neurological conditions, reductions in suicide, all of these things they're claiming. But there's a lot of problems that we learn from the fluoridation idea of putting it in water. Number one, there's no consideration of the interactions of lithium with the other components of water and contaminants.
Well, that was my next point, studying biology. And, of course, you are a top brain surgeon, researcher, know a lot more than I do, but just studying when you have a bunch of chemicals mixed together, they have a magnifying effect on each other.